About the only time when volume means the same thing to everybody is when we say volume control. But if you walk up to him and you say, turn the volume up, you're talking about the gain of his faders, not volume. But you're allowed to say volume, but just remember you're being ambiguous. In fact, ambiguous terms such as volume cause confusion. And amateurs and professionals confuse the meanings of input level, output level, gain, and loudness all the time. And it's a confusing world out there, and I hope not to confuse you too much for the rest of my talk. When, here's a confusing statement, I turn my volume control up very far. Does this mean I'm going to get a high volume? Or my volume control is turned up very far. Does this mean I have a strong signal? Well, let's move on. Here's a good question. Does louder sound better? One day in my mastering studio, I patched in a new set of converters. Boy, did they sound great. I hooked the signal and I compared the sound between going through the D to A into the A to D to the original sound. I thought I had found nirvana. The sound going through those converters had more depth, it had more space, it was wider, I heard more inner detail. And you know what? I discovered within a short time that they were just a little bit out of calibration. 0.2 of a dB. 0.2 of a dB difference between input and output, and I thought that the world had fallen. You know? So really, does louder sound better? The answer is definitely yes. And this is most unfortunate. Okay, here's another piece of psychoacoustic information. How many of you knew already that a level increase produces a greater loudness change to the ear than the same level decrease? Somebody knows. A lot of people do not know this, but if I turn the level up 3 dB, it's going to sound like a bigger change than if I turn the level down 3 dB. And this has been confirmed by psychoacoustician Jim Johnston, who's giving a talk in the next room, but he studied all the hair cells and the attack times and release times of the ear, and he proved it. Here's another interesting story about loudness. Crescendos versus decrescendos. As mastering engineers, we learn to make crescendos. We love to make crescendos. But as our work matures, we soon learn to make decrescendos to balance out the music and give it more life. But it's harder for us to make decrescendos because loudness is a drug. And you know what? If we don't start treating loudness like the addiction that it really is, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. So think about it. Susan talked about the hair cells and how we're not too conscious about the habituation, but it's because loudness is a drug. And I'll bet that Daniel Levitin, who you're studying under, has talked about the, what is it, the pheromone? Not the pheromones, the hormone.
The neurotransmitters, which include hormones, yeah?
The hormones which are transmitted in the brain because of a reaction to loudness, and hopefully to changes in loudness as well. Or here's another one. How many of you are mix engineers? Raise your hands. Okay. Have you ever run into the situation where you raise the trumpet, and then you raise the trombone, and then you raise the guitar, and then you raise the vocal, and you end up with the same mix that you started with, only it's louder. It's because loudness is a drug. Or the mix, here's another one, the mix that has creeping loudness goes up and up and up. Now, maybe it was meant to have that because it was meant to have a big crescendo at the end, but perhaps not. And that, so you have to, as a mix engineer, be conscious of phenomenon that happens. You bring things up, you got to bring something down, and as we learn to mix as time goes on, we learn to mix subtractively as well as additively. We think, what instrument can I turn down instead of what instrument, in order to not mask the sound from the instrument that I'm not hearing as well. How many of you know that an EQ boost has more effect on the partial loudness than an EQ dip? It's psychoacoustically true. And here's another unfortunate thing about loudness. Loudness trumps sound quality. Even when the quality difference is subtle, loudness can trump sound quality when the difference is as little as 1 dB. I don't know about the science on that. I can simply say that from experience, I've observed that you can take an over-compressed or a fairly compressed material, and if you make it sound 1 dB louder than more open and dynamic material, even the most experienced listeners will say that the lower level one sounds compressed, when it's the one that's louder is the compressed one, because the loudness makes the hair cells in the ear and the attack times get more excited. And all of these facts open up the door to the loudness war. Here we are back in 2000, here we are now in the year 2009 already. And way back here in 1980, the average level, which is in red, of our compact discs at the beginning of this war is around -20. And between 1980 and 2000, the average level and the room for peaks got reduced, and the average level went up, and the room for dynamics got so squeezed that the average level of the compact disc went up almost 20 dB in 20 years. Now, I don't know if you know what 20 dB sounds like. That's a big change. That's like the dim control on your monitor gain. That's a big change. It also turns out to be a real big obstacle for a professional society such as the Audio Engineering Society, which is trying to set some kind of standards for things. Now, in the polite days of disc cutting, back in the analog days, the level of the LP and approximately the loudness went up about, I would say 4 dB maybe in 40 years, 5, 6 at the most.
Yeah, probably about that.
Yeah. Now, cutter heads are expensive. What was the most expensive cutter head that you ever had to replace, Bob?
Oh, well, around $3,500, but that was quite a while ago. They're probably up around $10,000 now.
Okay, but I thought it was a lot more than that. But you don't throw that away on a cutting session. You try not to. So they used peak limiters, and they were analog peak limiters, and so on. But how is it that in the analog days things went up about 4 dB, 6 dB at the most, but in the digital days it went up 20 dB?